It's a brand new kind of Sunday special. We're going to be answering your questions here on this Mailbag edition of the Sunday Special, episode 27, coming to you right now. Hello, friends, and welcome into the Sunday Special. My name is James Fisher. Like I said, this is going to be episode 27 of our Sunday series. And like we've said many times before, we like to do something a bit different. And this was kind of a carryover from this week's podcast. I thought I had a short one and asked for some listener questions and ideas, and ended up having a full podcast anyway. So we just said, hey, let's do this show today. So this is a mailbag episode. I don't have a fancy drop or anything for this, so we'll just kind of have some fun with it. Looking ahead, like I said, next Sunday, I was digging through the collection and found my old Suikoden 5 soundtrack, so I think that'd be really fun to look back and listen to that, especially with kind of all the Ueden Chronicles 100 Heroes news coming up here, or has been come out here the past couple weeks. It's kind of having me reflecting on this series, so I think that'd be pretty fun to go back and listen to. And then in 2 weeks from today, we'll be talking to our longtime listener friend Hans, and he will join us and kind of give us a European perspective to gaming and JRPGs in general. But today, we are hitting up the old mailbag, and I'm not really sure where we want to go first with this one. So, actually, well, we just talked about you, buddy. So, Hans wanted to, and I'm not sure if this is a question, a statement, or what it is, but he simply said, Chrono Trigger anniversary. And so that was kind of open to interpretation. I did a quick Google as to what he may have been inferring to, and well, dude, the best I can come up with is you were reflecting on the 25th anniversary of this game, so I guess you want me to kind of look back and talk about it, and so I'll do that. As you guys may or may not know, if you've been a long-time listener or not, Chrono Trigger is very high on not only my pantheon of JRPGs, but I believe it's foremost that grew up in our, that golden era and kind of cut our teeth on those games. It is held in extremely high regard. I do believe there is a bit of a disconnect with maybe some younger gamers who, well, shoot, maybe they weren't even born yet in 94, 95, and so they don't quite have that same level of perhaps appreciation. Sure, you can go back and play it, but I believe for myself, growing up and playing that when I did, that is why it is my all-time number one JRPG. To this day, I think you could have some parallels with the storytelling, just music, gameplay, overall story, quality of characters, both good guys and bad guys. You could equal perhaps one segment of that. The reason why Chrono Trigger is what it is the combination of all those. It's like the super mega best rock bands of all time, whereas they had the best singer, the best guitarist, the best drummer, the best bass, whatever. It did all those things, and obviously graphics have gotten better since then, but the elements that made Chrono Trigger so special back then not necessarily have been eclipsed yet, because good story is good story. It doesn't matter if it's 25 years ago or today. Gameplay is much the same way. Music, while you've had, you could have something much more rich or full orchestra sound, it's still great music. If you go back and listen to music from the 60s and 70s, it can be just as good, if not better, than stuff that's made today. And, well, let's be honest, in a lot of cases, it's questionable what some music even is nowadays. So that's my reflection on it. I don't foresee a time that's ever going to come that I'm going to say, yep, that's better. They did it. They finally made a better game. I don't know if that's possible. I really don't. I honestly, I dare say you could lock the same people who made the game in a room and tell them to make a game today, and they still may not be able to eclipse what they did back then. It was just so special. And yeah, obviously you can make a better looking game, but it's going to be really hard to do that. Now, obviously we got Chrono Cross, and there's been a long line of speculation as to if we get another game. At this point, I don't think I even want another one. I think let's just let it lie, let it sit there, and I don't even know if I would really want them to try to remake it either. I don't think it would work. Let's just let it be. If you want to remaster it and do something along those lines, I could at least be open to it, but I wouldn't want to change a thing. I don't want a remake of sorts. I would purely want, okay, let's make the exact same game with today's hardware. Maybe something like Sea of Stars. That type of idea I could be down for. Anything other than that, I'm really not keen on. So, Hans, I hope that's what you were going for. If not, sorry, maybe we can talk about it when we talk here in a couple weeks. Piggybacking kind of off of that, Dalton, well, he got in here a couple times, but his first question was, what do you look for in story, question, gameplay, question, or mechanics? Obviously, I think along those same lines of Chrono Trigger, I look for kind of a good quality melding of all those type of things. The worst part of a game is especially if it's of quality, when you meet something that doesn't hit that same level, it kind of brings the whole game down. It's no different than, let's say, at your normal 9-to-5 job. What is it? Nobody notices the 20 things that you did right that day. They notice the one thing that you did wrong. And I always hold the old customer service additive of, if you do something right, customer may tell their friend about it. Let me tell you, if you do something wrong, they're going to tell 20 people about that thing that you or your store did wrong. So it's kind of that same way that if I'm going along and yeah, the graphics look great, it's even got some good gameplay, but like the sound is lacking. Perfect example of this, Dragon Quest XI on the PlayStation 4 is still such a great game, and is held back from being near perfection by the lack of full orchestra soundtrack. That decision that they made for Lord only knows what reason really held that back. So what I look for, I don't think, and he didn't even mention this, but graphics aren't that important. That just makes it that much better. In a story, I really want strong characters that I can kind of relate to. They don't have to be, obviously they're not going to be a man in his late 30s. It's going to be your typical teenage cast of characters. I don't think that's ever going to change, but I just want, I don't need something super serious. I do like something that's maybe a little bit more lighthearted at times. That's always good. Gameplay, you guys know me. I'm a sucker for turn-based mechanics. So if I can overlook some deficiencies, if there is a turn-based battle system that's done well in it, that's just what I kind of prefer. I love a good action game as well, but to me, the way I play games is it's at the end of a long day, and I kind of do it to relax. So typically a turn-based battle system is a touch more relaxing. I don't have to be all, reflexes and all these things that have kind of diminished over the years. Good mechanics, those aren't as important in JRPGs. If you're playing a good action game, you do need your mechanics to all work flawlessly, or you're just going to, fall to your death a bunch of times. But typically, I want decent graphics. I want a great story. I really like the big, overarching story to where I don't need to know the bad guy in the first hour, but I do tend to like those games where you have this, your party of characters, and they already know who the main villain is going to be, or at least seemingly that, I don't know, like a Dragon Quest VIII, where, Dulmagus shows up pretty early, and that is the goal, is to track him down and defeat him. If that ultimately leads to something beyond that, as it normally does, it's no stretch to say that JRPGs, we usually are fighting some sort of gods at some point in time, but that is what I typically am drawn to, and I kind of hope that helped answer a bit for you there, Dalton. All right, for our next question, we're going to go to Michael, and he asks, what is my most/least favorite villain of a JRPG? So I guess he wants most favorite. That's an odd question to have to ask, but I understand what you're saying. You're talking about great villains. I guess that's the way you want to kind of look at it. I think you obviously go to Sephiroth in FF7. That's one of the top ones. One of the best and just brutal bad guys of all times would have to be Luca Blight from Suikoden 2. Dude was just, oh man, there is no... It's going to be hard to have a badder bad guy than that, and he doesn't hide it. Like, it is just that from the very beginning. Does some pretty awful things to not only, people in the game, innocent civilians, but wreaks havoc on your party as well. And just, you could not wait to take this guy down. You really, really hated him and want to see it come to justice. But for me, there's one bad guy that's on my wall, and it was an original painting print done up for me. If you ever get a chance, it's a Super Video Game Land, and you can find him on Instagram, and he does works that he hand paints from popular video games across all genres, but he's got one that he did for me, and it is the final battle in Final Fantasy VI. Kefka in his god form. When I think of villain, that's who I think of, because from pretty much the very beginning until the last battle, he is the foe. He poisons an entire town and wipes them out, killing one of your heroes' entire family. I mean, you see it from the beginning, you think, oh, he's that crazy court jester. Then he gets more maniacal, more villainous, and just does terrible thing after terrible thing. As we all know, he wins. He brings the world to ruin. Your party loses. It's not until you get the ultimate redemption and can finally stick it to him at the very end. So I don't know how you do better than that. I'm sure it could be written up and possibly tried. But like I said, you know him from the beginning and you fight him at the very end. That is your goal, is to take this guy down and save the world that he ruined. So that's going to be pretty, it's going to be pretty hard to top. I mean, even if you're talking something like, Chrono Trigger with Magnus, you win, and he ends up actually coming to his senses and even joining your party in order to face, and obviously Lavos, that's a pretty awesome big bad guy, but, it's not a person per se. It's a beastly form, kind of like, in Final Fantasy X, obviously you got Seymour, he's the main human one, but Sin is a giant, terrible bad guy thing, but it's not, well, okay, let's not get too deep into it, I guess, but you know what I'm saying. It's not an individual evil person, it's something much, much bigger than that that's threatening you. As far as like, and Dolmagus, I mentioned him in a previous answer, he's got pretty high on that mark. As far as like least favorite, I mentioned Seymour a second ago. I just didn't like him. I wanted to beat him up more because he was creepy and, trying to marry Yuna more than what he was doing. Obviously, he got worse and worse as the story went on. You just wanted to kind of like knock the fool out for trying to steal your girl more than what he was doing big evil ambitions-wise. And like I said, he gets worse and worse. So he wasn't too high up there on the list. I really didn't like Kuja from Final Fantasy IX. And I guess forgive me for thinking this way, but he looked way too much like a girl and had, especially a feeling at the time, it had a very effeminate way about him. And I was more confused than anything. Obviously, he was super uber powerful and wiped your party out on a number of times, but just didn't get that feeling of dread, I guess, every time that I had to go up against him. So I guess that's kind of my answer for it. I mean, it's hard to think about all across all these games that you play for so long. Those are the ones that kind of stick out in my mind more than others. All right, we got a few more to answer here, but let's do one more, then take a quick timeout, and we can kind of dive into the rest of them. I had a question from over on the old Twitter page. Jake wanted to know, what video game series has the most titles in your personal collection? So he required me to make a tally sheet and math and dive into the old collection in order to come up with these answers. And so this is physical copies only. I'm not going to count, let's say, the PlayStation 1 versions of games that I've got on my Vita. Okay, so there's a few of them here, but then there's probably some of them that are missing, but this is the best that I can come up with. And I got it kind of broken down into JRPGs. For the record, I've also got quite a few of the Ratchet and Clank series. That's probably my favorite game series, non-JRPGs, or one of them. I enjoy like Red Dead Redemption, those type. The other one I've got probably near the most, well, not most, but I've got pretty much all the Grand Theft Autos from Part 3 on. I very much enjoy that franchise and have bought it then multiple times with Part 5, and probably will again on PlayStation 5. But for this crowd, my JRPGs, and I wasn't quite sure, so I had to go back and look at these. So, like, let's say, obviously you guys know I love the Legend of Heroes Trails series. Now, I've only got 6 of those, and which doesn't sound like a ton of them. Keep in mind, there's only a handful, and now I've got 3 more that are, in my Steam account, but that's not a personal collection. Like I said, I think that tends to be more physical copies. Like Persona, I've only got 6 of those. Next up, the Atelier series. I've got 9 of those, but that only goes back to like PlayStation 3. So, Tales, I've got 10 of those. Dragon Quest comes in at, oddly enough, an even 11. But winning the tally is the Final Fantasy series. And I've got them clocked in at 19. Now, there's a lot more of those. Obviously, you got 15 main series entries. I don't have the online ones, but I have all of the other ones in some way, shape, or fashion. So, yeah, I probably missed 1 or 2 here or there, but that is the main tally. So, winner, chicken dinner is the Final Fantasy series. Not on that tally is Mystic Quest. That does not count. I actually don't own a copy for the Super Nintendo of Part 4. But, like, you know, I've got it on the DS that they re-released that version of it. And that is a pretty darn good version of it, to say the least. Seems like a perfect time. We'll take a brief pause here, and we'll be back with a few more answers on this mailbag edition of the Sunday Special. As always, we want to thank Anchor for their continued support of this podcast and pushing it out to all your ears. Way to go, Anchor. They're awesome. I would invite you guys to... all these questions are coming either from our Twitter or Facebook pages. So if you'd like to join those communities and perhaps be involved in the next mailbag podcast, just head over to JRPG Report, give us a like on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. I put out all the stories that we cover for the podcast, and occasionally saying some cool things like, I just add a few games to the collection this past week or two, and post pictures of that. People like doing that stuff all the time. Don't forget to give us a subscription on YouTube. All the videos that come out during the week that I end up talking about on the podcast, I share over there, as well as many other things, including video versions of all the podcast if you prefer to listen while you're pretending to work. That's always a fun thing too. So yeah, give us a sub over there and like our videos. I would really appreciate that. Our next question comes from Jordan. He says, what was your greatest JRPG moment, and what was your most frustrating? One of my greatest JRPG moments wasn't a moment exactly, like in terms of a game. I can probably think of a few other ones, but I really put a lot of time and effort into getting the Platinum Trophy for Ni no Kuni on the PlayStation 3. I loved the game to the point where I wanted to do that. It took quite a long time to do that. I mean, the base game alone was over 100 hours, and I would think I put at least 100 more into it in order to get that Platinum Trophy. But it was one of those deals, like, the last one was pretty hard to do and time-consuming, but I enjoyed being in that world, so it didn't really matter as much. And as I mentioned before, you may recall, I like trophies. They're fine. I don't really care about platinums very often. That may be the only JRPG that I've platinum trophied. I'd have to go back and double check that, but I don't have very many, maybe 8 or 9 total. It's just not a big deal for me. It's cool, but for that game, that meant a lot to me to try and go and do. As far as like greatest moments, I'm sure I have them in my mind. One of the ones that still tugs on my heartstrings is when, you bring back Chrono in Chrono Trigger. That one really always stuck with me, that moment of pure emotion where you thought somebody was gone, but then they're still alive. or you work so hard to bring them back in that instance. Obviously, it's not something we can do in everyday life, but that one has always kind of stuck with me over the years. I'm sure there's plenty of other ones, but it's easier for me to answer what was the most frustrating. I can do a recent one in particular, and that was the boss fight against the Okumura Foods in Persona 5 Royal. I think having a time limit definitely puts me on edge more than maybe it did before. That kind of stressed me out. And not having the right party makeup at the time, and just failing. Of course, there's a 30-minute time limit, and I failed it at least twice that I can recall. It may have been 3 times, and a full 30 minutes, so it wasn't like I just failed right away and restarted. Finally, making it was also a great moment for me because it took me a couple tries to accomplish it. I did feel vindicated at the end, but was extremely frustrated that it was so... I don't recall having a problem with it the first time, but this playthrough on Royal just kind of got to me, and it was frustrating. And this isn't an exact moment, but the mere idea that I put so many hours into Xenoblade Chronicles 2 in order to get all the blades, that was my goal, was to get that last blade that I could not do. That was one of the reasons why I put so much time into it and couldn't. Because of its draw system and the randomness involved with it, I was never rewarded for that. And there's nothing that I can do or not do other than just pour more time into it to may or may not get it. And that didn't... I guess I finally got to that point where it wasn't worth it anymore. And so that's pretty frustrating that what I set out to do in that game I could never accomplish. That's frustrating. And it's also frustrating, obviously, that Mother 3 never came to the United States. But that's on us. That is a side argument and frustrating thing for perhaps another day. And Nintendo, either make us a new one or get on with it. Because they haven't killed it. Like, it still pops up in random references and stuff. It's not like some of these other old JRPG genres where the companies are out of business or they just don't want to make them anymore. Nintendo can do it if they want to. Dan, he wants to know unpopular JRPG opinions. Now, I don't know what your guys' unpopular ones are, so I guess he's just wanting to know mine. Maybe he thought some other people might chime in as well. My most unpopular JRPG opinion has to be the fact that I can't stand Pokemon. There's a lot of people who love it. Obviously, I still cover it for the podcast. As you can probably tell, I don't cover it in depth. Like, there's no deep diving on Pokemon here. And yes, I completely understand Ni no Kuni has many elements similar to Pokemon. Yeah, got it. Argument made. Carry on. Don't like it. I played it once back in the day and have watched it several times. It's not something that's going to change. There's plenty of hundreds of millions of people who have bought it. It's the best selling for a reason. They continue to still sell well. You don't need me on board with that. That is one of the things I do kind of generally do in life. The more popular something is, the more I tend to go away from it, unless it's NFL football, and then I'm all in. But I guess is it unpopular to say that I still like turn-based battle systems? Seems to me that we keep going away from that, although there are plenty of great ones that are carrying on that torch and finding ways, i.e., Dragon Quest or Persona and Trails. They have found ways to innovate those battle systems and make them work extremely well to keep the strategic elements involved in it. Is it unpopular to say I still like grinding and and carrying on. I don't like pointless grinding. And then if you even go full effect, like something like the new Paper Mario, where your battles really don't matter as much, that's a little different. But I still don't mind a good grind if it's required to get to that next area. Although going into a fight kind of a little under-leveled poses that more of a challenge. And if you die, you know that you needed to go and do a bit more. I'm sure there's plenty of other unpopular ones. I have got to the point where I don't like the random battles as much, but I do, I think seeing an enemy on the screen is the least that we could ask of these uber powerful systems. It makes a lot of sense. That's just me. Trying to think if there's anything else that I don't really know. I guess that's probably most of it. I'm sure I'll think of some other ones. Maybe I can throw back out there for next time. But thanks for your question, Dan. I guess I do know one other unpopular one that I have, and that's that I enjoyed Star Ocean 5. I know there's so many people that did not like it. I think I was one of the very few that actually enjoyed it. Obviously, I understand why people would not like it, and that's okay. That's always been one of my, okay, maybe this is unpopular, that because you don't like something, that means everybody else has to not like it. No, that's what opinions are. And there's no right or wrong opinions. Now, you can have ideas that are certainly not not popular and may even be wrong in some minds, but as long as they are ideas, there's nothing wrong with it. Now, if your ideas are wrong and then you carry them out into actions that are wrong, i.e. against the law, infringing on other people's rights, that's when the problem is. But freedom of thought and opinions are okay, and they should be embraced. And those, we can debate our opinions and then come together on what brings us together, i.e. this community and our love of Japanese role-playing games. Okay, so I had to throw that one out there. That one did kind of pop into my head there at the very end. We've got one other comment, and it's, was it 3 questions? Yeah. Dalton hit me up with a 3-pack of questions here for our last little bit, and I've kind of answered a few of these already, but I'll kind of just throw it all in here. So he says, we'll kind of dissect this question by question. What constitutes a great JRPG to you? And the easy answer nowadays is, does it have the Legend of Heroes in the title to it? Because by and large, that is kind of what I'm looking for. In particular, like Trails of Cold Steel 3. So, like, if you go back to Cold Steel 1, where it kind of had that school stuff, I can live without that. That's fine. But yeah, even going back, as I'm playing through the Sky sub-series, funny. I found the more I play along, I do like some humor in these games. That even if it's a super serious game, characters and moments of just funny need to be thrown in there. In particular, like in the Sky series. So every single treasure chest that you open up, once you get that item out, there's still an exclamation point over the empty chest. And I think I've seen a couple that repeat themselves, but by and large, there is a funny thing that this empty treasure chest will say, a note from the developers each time, and it's almost always good for a laugh. But characters that have that comedic element into it, that's always good, of course. But yeah, that series in particular, whereas something like Final Fantasy has gone away from a few things that made it so great. I feel like Dragon Quest is still doing that. But having a party and being able to then make your best party from these choices. There's sometimes when you're like, okay, I've got to make this party of 4, and well, I've only got 4 characters, so that makes it a little bit easier. There's sometimes that's okay, but I like somewhere's in that, if I'm making a party of 4, right, somewhere's in that 8 to 10 range of there's 2 people that you're never going to use. You're not going to, and you can't really see why anybody would choose to use those characters. Now, you get much more than that, and you can get to some pretty tough decisions. But I think if you're in that range, then you give that player the freedom to make a choice. I don't like the idea of you have to pick the main character in your party at all times. I think that if you get a fair number, that there's really no reason why you can't take that person out. Now, most of the time, you probably wouldn't want to do that. I think a game like Final Fantasy 12, if you think the main character is Vaughn, well, get out of here. I don't need you in my party. There's a whole bunch of other people that are going to be in my 3-person party of FF12 before he's ever going to make it in there. And I know that game struggled with who the lead character is. It could have been Ash, him. It could have been Balthier. There's theories about that. In reality, the story kind of revolves around as Bosch as well. But those are some of the things that I look for. You need a great story, obviously. You need strong characters that keep you engaged in it. You need a great turn-based battle system. I can deal with a good action RPG if done right. Those are fine and they're fun. Obviously, Remake did a fantastic job of that. It had its problems still, but I can put up with the flaws of a turn-based system easier than that. I need decent music. Like I harped on before, Dragon Quest XI, with its lack of orchestra, I still can't say that word, of a full orchestra soundtrack. I feel like I wanted that because it was in Dragon Quest VIII, right? So that was on the PlayStation 2, so I expect that to be in the new game. If I never knew that previously, I'd be just fine with the new version. That's different. But I don't need... I know music is a lot more important to other people than me. I like good music, of course, and no music would be weird. But it's not something that I constantly be like, oh man, it's got to have this great soundtrack. That's so vital. I'd rather have other areas, like I said, I prefer that villain that you meet fairly often, betrays you, does major damage, and then you've got to go and track him down and defeat him. That's always pretty cool. So, JRPGs have this, you can bundle them and they're kind of the same thing over and over again, but that's kind of why we play them as well. We don't need something revolutionary every time. We need some evolutions and to get better at that formula. So I look at the Legend of Heroes series, and these games have gotten better and better with each entry. And then I look at something like the Atelier series, which finally took all these years and titles and then finally kind of got it right with Ryza. And they made a much stronger product. Then you think of something like Final Fantasy, which has struggled here recently. And it's going to be telling to see what the future holds for that. And that kind of answers his next question of what elements do you look for and rejoice over. It's, you don't want to sound kind of pervy, but, cute girl characters. I'm a guy, so I prefer to have cute girl characters to look at. I think that's okay to say. If you are a female gamer, you probably want to have good-looking guys to look at for this entire 100-hour experience or whatever, right? Do they make do the cute ones make it into your party more often than not? Yeah, probably. Okay, that's definitely an idea in JRPGs is we like cute characters, make them overpowered, and put them in our party. That is just fine and dandy. Obviously, I rejoice over a good turn-based battle system. That brings joy to me. That is something that I look for. I will immediately glance at that type of game more so than others. He asks also, what are some of the tropes that you absolutely hate that seem to become more commonplace these days, if any? I don't really know. There's a few things that kind of irk me. Like I said before, you need to evolve, but you don't need to rewrite the script every single time. We like what's tried and true in our games. I guess one thing that has happened, at least here recently, that I'm not a huge fan of completely is the Persona 5 debacle with Royal. The idea of you get a game and then you get a perfect version of the game 2 years later that you've got to now rebuy for another $60. That's it's a little iffy. I think I'd rather have the complete game at first. We're going to see how this breaks down with Dragon Quest 11, right? Where we had a very, very good game come out and then had a different version come out for the Switch with some better features, but then it's obviously been made just for the Switch and utilized, and now you're having that version now ported to Xbox One and Steam and PS4 rather than something as it should be in its best form. So we're going to see if that doesn't, hopefully that changes, but I guess at this point it's probably not going to do it. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of these different versions of the same game coming out, and I don't know, too many people are like, yeah, I love that. That's great. DLC doesn't bother me because if somebody wants to pay for extra experience, that's great. You should never have to pay for something that should be included in the first place. Obviously I didn't like what they did with 15. I didn't like the game to begin with necessarily, and I certainly didn't like that it was broken when it came out. Do not release a game until it's ready to come out. We are a patient people. We have to be with this genre. Do not bring out a game that I'm not going to like and then change it. I may not still like it, but at least it's not broken and it's not an incomplete experience. So maybe that's a thing from now on. I definitely like what they did, like with Dragon Quest 11, where you've got that party out there in the field. So maybe that would be something. It's funny because they did that in like Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky. You had all 4 members, but then in the newer ones, it's just usually Rain or one character on screen at a time. I do like seeing my party of 4 out there at all times. Why couldn't we do that, right? I mean, these systems are so powerful. You would certainly think it had the ability to render a 4-person party at the same time. That should be mandatory, I believe. Going into a separate loading screen for your battle, that's fine. I think it's really cool when you just integrate it into what you see, that then becomes the battlefield, and it's squared off or circled off. That's your parameters, and then it's into battle. But it doesn't matter either way to me, to be quite honest. So that's kind of the side of things that I look for, and I hope that answered some of your questions. I'm sure some thoughts will pop in my head later on, but that's just what I kind of came to at the moment. So that's going to wrap it up for our Sunday special episode 27. Hope you have enjoyed it. I will say one final thing, and that's something that I'm trying to do so you can kind of be thinking about this if you're listening. Our next podcast that we are going to do on Wednesday we're going to premiere a new segment. So I'd like you guys to start thinking about this and some things that you would like to do. I'd love to do it on current games that have come out or come out recently. So this week we're going to have our first listener review. It's going to come from our buddy Jake, and he has been playing Fairy Tail. As you guys know, I don't do reviews. I will give my opinion, like final opinions on the game, but I can't play them all. I can't afford to play them all. So I thought what would be really cool is if you guys would like to, you can either write it and I'll read it, or if you want to make a video, a sound file, I'd be more than happy to put that into the podcast. So I'd really like to focus on games that have just come out. But if you just played a great JRPG for the first time and you want to make a review for it, I think that's cool too. Maybe we can make it more of a regular thing. I'd be super fine to do that. So you can send it to me on Facebook. That's one of the easiest ways. You can just send me a personal message, and I can copy and paste. It can be in an email. If you want to make a Word file, that's fine too, or attach it. Obviously that's an easy way to do it. You can email, and I can copy it from your message, or if you want to attach a file, do that way. jrpgreport@gmail.com. There's lots of ways you can get a hold of me and make that happen. And I would love to read your review on a future podcast. So yeah, we're going to try to get that rolling out here on a fairly regular basis. That's it for the podcast. Thank you much for tuning in. Hope you have enjoyed it, and I hope I kind of answered some of the questions out there. We'll see you guys back here on Wednesday. My name is James Fisher. Thank you so much for tuning in to this podcast and everyone here on the JRPG Report. Till next time, get back out there and level up.